But that's how it goes. If you're good at winging it, then I think you're good at anything. You can get up there and just talk a bunch of smack.
Well, that's what they say.
But,
They
but
say if you can be good at anything, be good at lying, and then you're good at everything. So, by the way, I
yeah,
transitioned
yeah,
us to live, just so you know.
fair enough.
I was
Fucking
really hoping you'd say something racist. Like you'd be like, "Oh man, how about this whole police interaction thing in Minnesota where like that cop put his knee into that dude's back when he was already handcuffed? Did you hear about
I
that?"
saw that. What's the deal with that? I saw the thing on Twitter, but I don't know. I just know some dude put his knee in a black dude's back, some cop.
Yeah.
So what's the deal there?
So I don't know any of their names, so I'm just going to be like, you know, very vague
Guy
about it, I
A.
guess. I don't know. This is one of those things where it's like when somebody tells you for the 18th time that, you know, it's going to rain. You know, like at a certain point in your life, like when you're young, you're like, "Oh, it's raining. This affects my life
Mhm.
so much." And then as you get older, you've seen rain so many times, you're just like, "Oh, okay, cool." Like now we're at that point where I think that's where we're at, where it's like, oh, a cop killed a black guy or whatever. Like, and you know nothing's gonna come of it because
Yeah.
that's just the nature. That's how it is, you know. Because they have that fraternity of police, the FOP, who like provides legal counsel, and they're like super good at this sort of thing. This isn't like the first time they've had to defend uh, a clearly guilty police officer for committing a crime or killing somebody who was in custody already. Now, so like my
Mhm.
opinion on the whole thing, apparently like this dude like wrote some bad checks, and then like the cops arrested him, and he was, I assume, struggling or resisting or whatever, which is like the problem. It's
Yeah.
the consist. That's like the one thing that you can see in every one of these things. If you go to arrest somebody and they struggle, you have to fight, and then they keep fighting, and then you end up going overboard and you do something like put your knee in the guy's neck, and then they die, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
like
yeah. So the
if
guy died?
yeah, apparently. And
Oh,
and that's what's so frustrating to me. So like if you don't resist, you're not going to die.
yeah.
That's my argument for the police officer. And that's about where my argument for him ends because everything else about the case is like clear cut. This cop is guilty as hell. But I will say to anybody who like dies in police custody, like almost every time it's because they were resisting or fighting or kicking and screaming. They didn't just go quietly on their way into the back of the police. How many? And that's their argument too. Is they're like, well, how come Dylan, whatever his face, the guy who shot up the church down in the south, he
Mhm.
shot up that church, and then they like arrested him peacefully and carried him out, but he didn't resist. And you know, like all
Mhm.
these guys who happen to be white, like you can tell, and that's their argument. They're like, oh, it's white guys. Well, no, it's guys who didn't
Yeah.
struggle or who didn't resist arrest. And those are the guys who peacefully go and are put in jail. The guys who fight and kick and scream and push and shove and everything and don't go peacefully, they're the ones who die. So I mean, like, I can be like, it's a black or white thing, or I can be like, well, it's a resist or don't resist thing. Because if you're
Yeah.
not guilty, you can fight the charge. You know, you'll spend the night
Yeah.
in jail or whatever, but you'll have your day in court. But these guys want to hold court in the street, both on both sides. And
Well, I'm definitely
yeah,
with you on this one. I'm definitely with you on this because I mean the bottom line is like if you've done crime, and like the cops are there like that. This is just my logic, right? You do a crime and then the cops show up and it's like like on Fear and Loathing when he's like, I did it, I committed a crime, I knew it was wrong, I did it anyways. Like at that point, that's when you go, oh, busted.
yep,
You know what I mean? And that's like any person, like I think with a semblance of some intelligence would go, well, I guess it's time to put my hands up, because they're carrying guns.
right.
First of all, like they're carrying guns. That should be enough for you to go, well, let me not get at the least shot, you know. As for putting his knee in his back or whatever,
And
I'm
his
kind of like
neck,
shocked. His
yeah,
neck? Oh, is it?
yeah.
So this is what I gather is he put his knee in the guy's neck and then like what, broke his neck or something?
Suffocated him. I think he couldn't breathe, and he ended up asphyxiating. For like 6 minutes, he had his knee in
I'm
this
sorry, I know
dude's
that's
neck.
not funny, but it is kind of funny. it was like a accidental, I guess, right?
Well, so
Quote
here's
unquote.
my again, this goes I got to see more than just the footage that
Yeah.
was taken by somebody on a camera who
Right.
showed up
Right.
late and shit.
Right.
And because that's
Yeah,
how
of
it always
course.
is. Everybody's like, "Oh, this is clearly black and white, a
There's
case
like
of
some
murder or
bias.
whatever."
There's some bias involved somewhere. Yeah.
But so apparently, and this is the story that I've heard so far, so I can't be sure how true it is. For 6 minutes, for 6 whole minutes, this dude had his knee on this guy's neck. Why, after the first 30 seconds, did the cop not feel comfortable enough to take his knee off of his neck? I would assume there was still some resistance and some struggling, and
Hmm.
he had
Yeah.
to continue to apply pressure. Now, did he
That's a
have
safe
to
assumption.
for 6 minutes? Like, this is clearly like, and I assume that based on how quickly the Minneapolis police department, or I believe it's in Minneapolis, how quickly they fired that guy. I
Yeah.
gotta believe that putting your knee into somebody's neck when they're already in custody and already handcuffed is against their standard operating procedure. Like, I feel like that's pretty clear in that case. And again, why a knee? And now this is a popular thing within the law enforcement community. Once the cuffs are on, the fight's over. That's it. Now,
Hmm.
if they're still fighting, you have to kind of like be careful because they're your baby at that point. Like, you have to take care of that person who is in custody. They are detained by you, just like you wouldn't take a baby, like your own child, and just carelessly toss him off to the side. Like, that's your baby. You have to take care of that baby. He's in your custody. It's the same thing with a prisoner or a detainee, somebody that you
Right.
detained, whatever.
Well, couldn't you just, and correct me if I'm wrong, couldn't you just tase them?
That
Like,
was going to be my argument, was like, he had a plethora of tools at his
yeah.
disposal that he could have used to slow this guy down. If the guy was still fighting, hit him with the taser, on the
Right.
thigh. That's enough to keep him down. Once he's
Yeah.
down, he's already like in
Yeah.
a difficult position to move. Or put your knee into the back of his knee if he's still on his belly and he's still fighting. He's not going anywhere if you put your knee into the back of his. That's a very sensitive area. He's not going to be able to
Right.
get up with you applying pressure there, or his thigh, or even the small of his back. I mean, there's a
I
couple
think
places
even the
that you can
sound
do
of a
it.
taser is like, I don't know if, I mean, I'm sure you have, but even the sound of like a taser, the
The
crackling,
crackling.
that's
Yep.
a pretty terrifying sound. Like get near a taser and
I've
hear
been
the
tased
sound, you will
before. It's
strike
not
fear
pleasant.
into people. The sound alone is like terrifying, in my opinion. That'll
As
stop me in my tracks. Like somebody comes at me with a taser, I'm gonna run, dude.
Yep.
And I know like it's not gonna kill you, but
It'll
still,
put
that
you
sound,
down.
something
It's
about that
enough to put
sound,
you
dude.
down. Yeah, I've been tased before. I've been tased. I've been pepper sprayed. I've been all that stuff, and they're all
Right.
very, very effective. A knee in the neck, while effective, is a bit over the top.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think this officer was out of line, but I also think that, and this goes back to my opinion of um, the police and what they do, right?
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
we give them a little bit of leeway to make decisions that are maybe unpopular because of the nature of how dangerous their job is. Like,
Right.
I
Right.
expect that they want to go home to their families every day, and
Yeah.
I expect them to sometimes go outside of the left and right limits of the police department to make sure that happens.
Right.
Again, did he legitimate? And this is how he's going to get off. I can guarantee it. He felt legitimately threatened by something in the area, whether it was the guy himself, his buddies, people who were filming, just unruly people in the crowd, whatever. Like, he is going to say that he felt felt like he wasn't safe, and he had to make, or that was the decision that he made at the time, and he'll probably serve, I don't know, like nothing, if anything, time
Right.
served or some nonsense. But that's just how it is with the police, because I think they know their left and right limits. Well, I know that they know their left and right limits as far as department standards, but I think when it comes to like what they can get away with, I think they also know those left and right limits, and they're willing to totally ignore the previous limitations that are put on them by the standard operating procedure in order to make it home at night. And I get that. and I understand that that's a thing. And if I was fighting a cop, I would expect them to fight me. You know, I wouldn't expect them to be like, "Oh, he's fighting. I can't do anything. Oh my god." You know,
Right.
like I would expect them to put up a legitimate fight, and at some point whoop me with one of their, you know, their baton, or hit me with the taser, or hit me with the pepper spray, or a combination of all three. And if I continued to fight after all that, and I was down on the ground, and he had to put his knee into my neck, I would be like, "Okay, you win," like a tap out, you know, and that's but I think the problem is, and again, I haven't seen all the footage and from his body camera and from other passersby. I see one
Yeah.
camera or whatever, and I got to assume that there's more to it. There always is, and I'd be curious to see if this guy was being overly aggressive leading up to it, if he had threatened him, or if maybe there were more people around that maybe we didn't see, because the camera starts and stops
Well,
when
I have
the
kind of like a
camera.
skewed opinion. I think the cops should be allowed more because like I would keep a lot of people in line. Like for example, like I lived in Germany for a few years. I know you
Oh
remember.
yeah,
But the Polizei, man, like they have like literally no rules when it comes to police brutality. Like they carry
right.
around batons, and like if you're drunk in public, like they will beat the freaking sneeze out of you, dude. And it's like crazy. Like I remember being out drunk as shit, and like everybody going, "Oh man, like we're fine, like you don't go." And then there was that one dude that like wanted to start something with the Polizei, and then out of nowhere, there's like 16 of them, and they're all billy clubbing the shit out of him. And there's nothing's gonna happen to them because that's not against the law there. Like there's nothing wrong with that. And of course, the guy learned his lesson. Like he never messed with the Polizei again after that.
Right.
Like he knew better,
Well, that's
Like
like when you get a DUI over there, or when you're drinking and driving over there, and they go to take the breathalyzer, and if you say no, they take the blood test. They can take it right then and there, and
right.
if you say no, they'll get the blood from you. They'll get it from another way,
Yeah.
and it won't be one that is maybe as neat and clean as
Yeah.
you know, an IV being stuck into you, or a blood draw or whatever. It's
Yeah.
from you. It's going to come from your mouth or whatever,
Right.
with a billy club to it. But yeah, that's another thing too. Is like it's always right. They're always like, oh, it's always the black guy. It's the white cop and the black guy, the black
Yeah.
whatever victim. And I don't mean whatever. I mean he clearly was a victim, but you know, I was
Yeah.
trying to think of the word. And the black victim. The the problem is like historical statistically
Yeah.
like you
Yeah.
have to again, and this is Minneapolis, right? I mean this is
Yeah.
like big uh what do they call it, little terrorism, like that's where the highest rate
It's like the point where it's
Islamic
so
terrorists
silly.
come from.
It's so silly that like you think that it's a surprise that it's a black man. Like, no, that's not a surprise. And I'm doing my best not to sound racist, but like like you said, statistically, the chances of the suspect or the perpetrator being African American or black or whatever you want to call it are probably more likely, and that's just like fact. Like oh, they busted another black guy. Well, what do you expect?
Yeah, I mean, like if you like,
They're the ones
well,
committing the crimes.
this is not a surprise to me because I read up on the FBI statistics. Like, I
Yeah.
know that if you tell me that somebody was arrested, I'm going to think statistically, or arrested for burglary or armed robbery, I'm going to say, well, statistically, it's probably a black guy, right?
Yeah,
And they're like,
exactly.
and then sometimes they'll be like, no, it's a white guy, and be like, oh, well, okay, right
Yeah.
on. I mean, it happens. It happens
Yeah.
at a far lower
Right on.
frequency, but that's
What a
just, I'm talking about statistically, and people are
yeah.
like, no, it's racist to point to. That's why they don't allow you to post statistics anymore, and make comments about statistics in, like, I mean, they'll shadow ban you, or they'll block you, or they'll remove your tweet or your post if you point to
Right.
statistics, because statistics are racist, is like the argument that BuzzFeed makes, and it has since stuck. So
Yeah.
you can't refer to statistics when people start talking about crime rates and all that sort of stuff. But the fact remains that 13% of the population commits 50% of the violent crimes in America, which is, I don't know. It should come as no surprise to people when
No,
they're like,
yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
a
It's
white cop killed a black guy. Well, statistically, the interactions are going to be that way. Statistically, there are more white cops, and statistically, there are more black criminals. Statistically, this is not from a racist standpoint. This
mhm.
is just, I'm strictly pointing to the data. So
Yeah.
when that happens, yeah, I'm like not surprised. Am I surprised that a white guy or a white cop killed a black guy? No, that's what we hear about. Do we hear about the times that the black guy or the black cop kills the black guy? No.
Is
Do
it
we hear
is
about
it
the times that the black cop kills the white guy? No. Do we hear about the times that the infinitesimal times that the black guy kills the black guy, because black on black crime is statistically the largest number of homicides that we have in the United States? No. That is like the problem that we have, and nobody wants to address it. But a white cop kills a black guy who's resisting during an arrest or whatever. Sound the alarms, ring the bells, because this is a big deal.
Well, is it okay? Is it racist to say? And tell me this is if this is racist. The next time someone says like stop killing, like tell cops to stop killing black people, would it be racist to say, well, tell black people to stop committing crime?
Well, no, you say, well, why don't we tell black people to stop killing black people? Why don't we start there? And that'll be a good, I mean, if we could get black people to stop killing black people, then the number of black homicides and black deaths in America would decrease by like, gosh dang, it was by like 50%.
Yeah.
50%, you know?
Yeah,
and
that's ridiculous.
so, I mean, that's, when people talk about getting rid of, we need to get rid of the white nationalists. Okay, yeah, I agree that the white supremacists, I wouldn't say white nationalists because that broadens the term to just any white guy who values their country,
Right.
which should be like everybody should value their country. It shouldn't just be strictly a white thing, because it's your home. It would be like saying, "Oh, my house fucking sucks." Okay, well then do something about it. Like clean up your house or whatever.
Yeah, or move, for
paint
fuck's
it.
sake.
I don't know. But, you know, the people talk about we need to get rid of the white supremacists. We'll say that. Okay, they account for like a fraction of a percent of the population or whatever. But let's go ahead and get rid of them and see how much of a difference that makes as far as crime goes. Almost non-existent. You probably wouldn't even notice. And even if you looked at the data, it probably wouldn't even round up to any kind of like notable percentage. Okay, now if we want to say let's cut down on the violent crime in the United States, I can tell you how we can get rid of 13% of the population and get rid of 50% of the violent crime. Nobody wants to hear that though, because that's racist, but I'm just referring strictly to data,
of course.
And again, if we want to talk about getting rid of a group of people, that's no less racist than saying, well, let's get rid of 13% of the population, the black population, in order to eliminate 50% of violent crime. Would you agree to that? Well, no, that's racist. Okay, well, then it would be racist to say, let's get rid of white people who have a certain opinion. That's xenophobic at the very least.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, you're right.
Anyways, that's my
spot
opinion.
on right, dude. I agree with you on that.
Anyways, was it wrong? Was it wrong? Thank you. I appreciate you agreeing with it, because very few people do. But I knew that you would secretly. I would never put that on you though. But no, I would say was the officer wrong? Yeah, there were a lot of other ways that he could have dealt with that situation. Did he need to aggressively kill that guy by strangling him essentially or asphyxiating him? No, and there's no excuse for it. And I do hope that he gets punished accordingly, appropriately, for murdering a guy, or manslaughter. I think manslaughter will probably end up being what the argument is. But because if they go for murder, it won't fly at all. It'll get thrown out. But manslaughter will be brought in there, and that could carry 3 to 5 years. Anyways, and then the dude ends up in jail with a bunch of people that he convicted or tried to convict.
That's got to be. Yeah.
And he's going to be no better off than the pedophiles in there. So. Anyways, that just goes to like street justice and shit like that. And as long as he spends a year in jail, he'll suffer for it, and it'll be. He's already been fired, and he'll never be hired again as a peace officer. And I mean, everything. His life is already pretty much over as far as that career field. He'll have to switch and start working, and he'll be the guy. Oh, you're that guy who killed the guy by kneeling on his neck. Like you're a guy who doesn't know how to follow the rules. I know you. And, so his life is pretty much over anyways, but I do agree that he should spend some time in jail, and I think that this would be a good place to start to recognize the issues that we do have with police brutality, but at the same time, I hope that people will realize, maybe we should stop resisting. Like maybe we should just, like, if we're arrested, we should go peacefully and fight it in the justice system. And instead we have people who, and this is the other part that blows my mind, is like we're into a situation, again, another Trayvon Martin situation, where as soon as this individual dies, the people take to the streets in their own neighborhoods and starts tipping over cars and burning buildings down and stuff. Their own neighbors and like their own
Yeah.
black-owned businesses in their neighborhood. They're looting them and they're taken to the streets. And I don't care. I saw the video of them like breaking into the police the motor
Target.
pool. No, they broke into the motor pool and they started destroying the police cars. Great, do that. Take your aggression out on the right people. Don't go to black-owned businesses, your own friends and family and neighbors, and loot and burn and tip over their cars and destroy all their property. You're only making it worse for yourself, and you're making
Right.
yourself look like a bunch of assholes. Take your frustrations out on the right people. And if that means going to the police department and destroying the motor pool, by all means, if that's what you think that you need to do, go for it. But take it out on the right people. Goodness gracious, stop destroying your own fucking neighborhoods.
Right.
So, but anyways, what else has been going on in your world, V? I know we kind of got off on. We're already 22 minutes in, and we've just been talking about this racist stuff.
Well, nothing much really this week. It's been pretty dull. I gotta say, I hasn't been like anything too exciting in my life. Let me see. Well, here's something interesting actually. I found this website, and it's basically like how to find like a foreign wife, right? Because
The
I'm
mail
getting
order
lonely.
brides.
Mail order. It's basically like mail order brides, and like, so I'm getting lonely, and I'm like, all right, well, we'll see what it is, right? So I check out the testimonials and see like what all these people are saying, and like it seems legit. But here's the thing: is like man, these like dating websites, like if you want to meet foreigners, like and like date foreigners, like it's really tough with these websites because a lot of them are just like bot driven. Where you get on there and you like create a profile, and then all of a sudden you have like 50 messages from like these gorgeous like 10 women, like tens, like number 10, like up there, like dime pieces, and you're going, wow, this girl's so beautiful and she's messaging me, but her dialogue seems a little confusing. And then you start getting messages that seem like they were copy and pasted, and you go, wait a second. So my point is, you have to be careful because a lot of times they're just not real, and like a lot of them are like pay to like talk to people. So it's not like you pay a subscription. It's like you're paying like $20 just to talk to one person one time, like to send this email, submit our coins or whatever, and then you have to buy the coins, and they're like $30 for one coin. It's like
Jeez,
ridiculous,
Louise.
right? So you have to be careful, right?
Love
Which
is
I'm like,
expensive, apparently.
it really is. But I'm like pro at this, right? Because I've been doing this since like I was in Iraq, like since 2008 or whatever, like dating girls online and like meeting girls in other countries. As I've dated a lot of girls in other countries. In fact, I even went to another country, well, a couple of times to other countries to meet girls. But so I'm like I'm a veteran of this. Like I know what I'm doing. Like I get on there and I laugh. I'm like, what idiot would fall for this, And like I see like the little things that they go, oh yeah, like the best way that you can know the site is not legit is like right away they go, are you okay with getting hundreds of emails every day from gorgeous women? And you go, no, that's not going to happen. Look at me. Like, no, gorgeous women are like, if a girl is not very attractive and she's emailing you, then maybe it's legit. But if they're all like 100% gorgeous women and they all look like they did glamour shots and like straight out of like porno mags, then you should be a little wary because they're not going to be messaging you, for real. You know what I mean? But
Right.
anyways, let me get back to the actual website that I found. I found this one website, and basically it's like actual mail order brides, and they have like the matchmaker thing where somebody intervenes and they like connect you to. And so I've been kind of like reviewing it. I haven't done anything yet. I've just been like reviewing it and figuring it all out. But like I think what I'm looking for is probably like a Thai wife, like a Thai girl. I told you about my favorite hooker when I was
Right,
in
right, right.
Germany was a Thai girl. And so I'm partial to like the Thai, And so I was thinking, that'd be a good place to visit. Plus, it's really cheap. It's super cheap. You can go there like on $200 for like a week, and just enjoy the shit out. I mean, this is a place we're talking about where they have what's called husband daycares.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Or the husband daycares. You leave your husband, and then you can go shop while they get a hand job from a Thai masseur. But so
Well, I would
I'm
hope it would
reviewing it.
be a
I'll
masseuse because I think masseur is the male a male
Oh, I don't know.
massager. Yeah.
Well, probably either or, to be honest.
Well, yeah,
They
it
have
is. It is
they have the
Thai,
lady
yeah.
voice there, but But I'll keep you updated. I'll keep everybody updated on that because I'm just reviewing it right now. I haven't really gone through much of it, but I'm trying to figure out like how I can do it the best way because I think that is probably my best bet is just to like get a wife, just go get one.
Yeah.
Instead of having to like go meet, especially in California, dude, like they're all liberal left, like yahoos, like super feminist, like with the horrible pink hair and they all look like that. I'm not exaggerating. Like they all look like that out here, and it's like it's so off-putting and unattractive to me. It's like thinking about it gives me like the willies. It disgusts me,
Yeah, and
right?
then
So
the
my
hot ones
logic
have
is,
dicks, right? Isn't that
yeah,
like the thing out there? You
exactly,
got to ask people if
yeah.
they've got a penis.
Yeah, exactly. And so so my logic is, well, I should just go get a wife. And like these countries, like, and here's the funny thing too, is like there are a bunch of countries where like the women they like just want to get married, like they just want to leave and come to the US. And obviously that shouldn't be like the one reason, but there are like it's a trip, dude. Like like Italy, like the Ukraine, obviously, which you should probably be careful for. But like I've been to the Ukraine. Like I know I told you this before. I've been to the Ukraine. I met a girl in the Ukraine, and I went over there to Kiev, and I actually spent like a weekend. She was like a singer, and she was gorgeous, and I spent the whole weekend with her. It was great, and which nothing came of it, but it was like a nice weekend where I got to bang like this model looking Ukrainian chick, which they all look like that out there. Like all these chicks in the Ukraine and Russia, they're all like tall and big boobs and like everything that you'd expect from. Well, that's where the models come from,
Right.
essentially, right? So you should already know that. But so that's my logic
Why
right
me?
now.
Like, why would I know that?
Yeah, well, I mean,
You say it
generally,
like I'm
people
old
know
hat or
that.
whatever at
People know
picking up
that.
Chechnyan women.
But that's my logic right now, basically, is I'm just gonna like go get a wife, because I'm getting old, man. Like I'm at this point where it's like I'm probably not gonna have a family, but I can at least get married, and not be alone for the rest of my life. Because it like every like it's such a funny thing to think about. Like I was like going, well, are there any prospects like at all? Do I have any prospects? And there's none. Like even the ex-girlfriends, ones that I go, they're probably not ever gonna talk to me again. Like the things that I've done, you know what I mean, and like the way that I've treated them. And looking back, I was an asshole. I'm not the same guy now, but like there's no way that I can win back the old, flings from back in the day because I was just such a horrible person. And like then what's worse is like the climate between male and female right now is like awful for a guy like me. So I don't know. It seems more logic just to go find one and like just be like, okay, like let's go. Which is what people do. There's a lot of guys they just go to like the Philippines or Taiwan or Thailand, which that's the way to do it, man. Just pick one out and come back and be like, now I have a wife,
My
and that's it.
geography is not so good. What's the difference between Taiwan and Thailand? Is it the same
Okay,
thing?
Taiwan. No, Taiwan is like is essentially like China. It's like Chinese. They speak Chinese there. Thailand is kind of like I want to say it's like the Mexico of Asia, but that's kind of the Philippines is more like the Mexico of Asia. Thailand is like they're like darker. They're darker skin. They're more like endowed. They're more well endowed. They're like mixed. They're like islanders, like Pacific Islanders, I guess you
Okay.
could say is what Thai girls are. They have like a really distinct accent too. That's kind of funny.
All
But
right.
yeah,
Yeah, I guess I never paid
Thailand is
attention to that, so I never knew what the
yeah,
difference was. So,
yeah.
all
But
right.
yeah,
Well,
that's it. That's
to V finding love
yeah.
online.
Yeah, cheers.
Hot damn. We're drinking
Yeah.
Jack Daniel's Tennessee Fire today. Remember, oh, man, the last time I think I drank that was that Halloween episode where I had to like drink 4 of them real quick and then
Oh
tell
yeah.
ghost stories and shit.
Gets you in the
And
boo boo.
tried to see how quickly I could, or see if I could beat the drunk coming on, beat my race against blood alcohol content. I believe is what this description said. So what do we?
Right.
There's something that we needed to talk about today. I know. I guess we can. We're like right on time. Look at this, 9:31,
Yeah.
and we're moving into the topic. Let's talk about
Perfect.
monsters and whatnot. Um, there was some news. Let me see. I'm gonna have to.
Oh.
Fuck it. I was gonna say I have to like
I'm
change
not
the
I
size
I
here.
know what you told me. I think I know what you're talking about because I think I saw the video of it. If this is what we're talking about, no, this
No, no,
isn't what I
no.
was talking.
Different thing. Nope.
This is No, it's a different thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
This isn't what I thought.
it's like a gigantic sloth monster. But this supposedly happened in Mexico, and somebody took a picture of this giant monster, and I know you probably can't see the picture that well, but it's like it looks like a four-legged sloth. Well, all sloths are four-legged, I guess, but looks like an
Yeah.
upright sloth that's kind of like walking through the forest. And somebody sent it to me, and I jokingly said that those people who are like, oh, nature is healing, we are the virus, that was the first thing
Yeah.
I said when I saw that. I thought, nature's healing, these monsters are coming out now. And that's kind of what I thought. Was like, I wondered if, with us being home and us like kind of like the population dwindling in the eyes of nature, right? Do you think we'll see
Hmm.
more or less um, strange activity like this? Like, maybe
That's
UFOs,
interesting.
maybe
No, I think I'm with you. I think
cryptids.
we'll see more, dude, because I mean, I don't know. Isn't there's like a religion that thinks like the planet is like alive, like a living thing, which I guess in a sense it is, right?
Yeah.
Like it's alive. And so I don't know,
Wiccan?
wouldn't
Yeah,
it
are
be
you thinking of
crazy?
Wiccan?
Maybe it is Wiccan where they say like the earth can like create beasts to like fight back or something. I don't know. I mean, if
I
that is
think
the
that
case, like
religion
then
is
yes.
science, because like that's what the earth does, right? Like
Yeah.
we I want to switch back to me, but I want to make sure that I'm still on the old picture before, you know, I don't
Hmm.
want to spoil the surprise of the next picture. I think I tell my sons this all the time. I say, you have to be careful as a human, because nature is always trying to kill you. Always. Like,
Yeah.
because you are a burden to nature. Like, we're, we are the biggest problem that the world has to deal with. And because, we're constantly destroying nature, we're creating, these, with all our CO2 and stuff that we create, we've added to that problem, which again, I don't think that man made CO2, or like the CO2 from man made things or whatever, is what caused global warming and climate change and stuff like that. I think nature itself creates enough CO2 to have created what we now see as climate change. But we do add to a lot of the stress that's put on the planet, and nature in turn tries to kill us for it. Like anytime you go out in the woods, you've got all these animals that would rather you not be there, right? You've got snakes, insects that will kill you. You have different plants even that will kill you.
Yeah.
You have natural
Yeah.
disasters. You have just the elements themselves are not designed for human existence. So nature is like constantly trying to kill you. So I think that would be a reasonable assumption, is that
Yeah.
the Earth is constantly throwing new things at you, and people complain about what do you call it, climate change and shit. And I'm like, and they're like, don't you care about nature? I'm like, nature will be fine. The world will be
Yeah,
fine.
definitely.
We
Yeah.
won't, but the world will be fine. Like if we
It's like
die
that.
off, that's the best thing that could happen to nature. Nature will just it'll fix itself, and that'll be fine.
It's like that. We talk about that George Carlin quote where he says, "How arrogant are people that they go save the world?" And it's like, dude, like the world is gonna be fine. Like you're the one that nothing is gonna survive. Like if something were to happen to the Earth, like there was an extinction level event, the Earth would go on.
Yeah.
You, on the other hand,
Yeah, so
save the.
trying to say like we need to take care of the planet, that is some like ivory tower super selfish bullshit. Like, because it's like, you don't care about the Earth, you care about the human race. So don't make
Yeah.
this about Earth. If you want this to be about the human race, I'll stand next to you, but you're not. Like, you're talking about, well, we got to save the planet. No, we have to save mankind, which is
People are so arrogant.
frankly the
You know
most
what cracks
selfish
me up
thing.
about these what do you call it? Well, I don't want to say like globalists or whatever. What are they called where they're like
Tree
not
huggers,
conser
hippies,
yeah, I guess tree
conservationists,
for the brevity.
homos or whatever.
No, yeah, conservationists, whatever. Like I think it's funny that like they're so like contradictory and like I always say like if you own an iPhone or a smartphone, then you're not one of those
Yeah,
things.
you're
Like
the
if you live in
problem.
a home, Like those, like that alone, like you're polluting right there. That's pollution. If you drive a car, you're polluting. Like what, dude? How are you trying to like, get rid of your carbon footprint or whatever, and you own a phone? Like people are
Or a
dying so
car,
that you can.
or a yeah, a home like with like a furnace or a chimney or whatever. Or like my favorite is when people are like, we need to save the planet. I'm like, oh, totally. Like, do you garden? No. uh do you recycle? Well, like I'll throw it in the recycling bin. Like if I drink a water at work, I'll throw it in the recycling bin at work. But you don't recycle at home. Well, no, because it costs like $20 a month or whatever. Like, and then you're like, well, do you really care about the planet? Like, you can't afford
Yeah.
$20 a month, or like, and they're like, well, I can't garden because I live in an apartment. Okay, well, there are community gardens. Well, have you tried like planting some shit in your windowsill? Have you tried like have you like actually do you have a car? Well, yeah. Okay, well then you're a fucking problem. Do you
Yeah.
bicycle to work at all? Well, no, I live like 10 miles away from my work. Well, that's a very easy commute on a bicycle. But do you at least ride the bus? Well, no, because it's inconvenient. Like you can like poke holes immediately in
Yeah.
anybody's
So
argument when
much.
they're like, because
That's
these are
what's
all
so
things.
funny about it.
And I'm the guy who's like, climate change is not real. Like a man-made
Yeah.
climate change is not real. Like the climate is changing. That's what the Earth does. But the problem is like, I'm not a man-made climate change alarmist. I'm not. I think that that's a bunch of bullshit. But I will reduce my carbon footprint, and I'm happy to, because if the problem is that we are creating so much that it's adding to an issue, a totally natural issue, like I don't want to be responsible for that, and I'll do my part. Okay,
Right.
even then, I'm just saying like, not necessarily do I believe in it, but I'll do my part anyways, just so that, because that's it's a good thing to do as a steward of the planet. Like we are
Do it
fortunate
or
enough
do
to
it
live
just
here.
to be like spiteful or like vindictive,
Well,
so that when that
well, I
when
do
that
it
comes
because I try to be
you
a
can
good
just be like, well, I
steward.
do. What do you do?
That on top of the fact that I'm trying to be a better steward of the planet that we're blessed to live on. Like we're very fortunate to live in this existence or whatever. The least I can do is clean up after myself. So like I garden, I
Right.
take care of my yard, I do right by nature. I don't litter and shit, and I recycle, and like I do the stuff that has been made available to me. I plant trees, like I do all that stuff. But like, and then you talk to these people who are like, these motherfuckers are out here like creating carbon footprints that we'll never be able to
Yeah.
fill. Well, do you garden? No. Do you take care of land? No. Have you planted a tree? Have you donated to an organization that plants trees? Well, no. Have you bought like a piece of farmland that you can like plant an orchard on? No. Have you recycled? No, not really. Do you walk to work? No. And this is like all the shit that you can point back at them. Like, well, what do you do? Well, I can't afford to. Okay, well, then you need to shut the fuck up, because
Yeah.
you are part of the problem. And like, you can't put it on everybody else to do their part when you're not willing to make some accommodations in your life. Like, I sincerely doubt you need to smoke weed every night during the week. Like, you could take that money and you could maybe use it to afford the fees for the recycling bin or whatever, that they'll even give you the recycling bin and you throw your shit in it and then you recycle, and that's that, and sort your plastics and shit. Or even
Right.
take your shit, you already got a car, take your shit, sort it, and bring it down to the recycling plant and give it to them for free, because they'll take it for free. Some even pay you. So like, this is the problem that I have with all these people. Like, that was my favorite. Somebody the other day told me, they were like, well, you need to care more about climate change, very real. And then I realized, I'm like, well, do you do those things? No. Okay, well then shut up, because like I
Yeah.
do. So I at least do the individual stuff that I need to do. And I am like active. I'm in the position, I'm about to tear down another tree that's in my front yard because it's diseased. And like, all the trees got this virus around here. And trees can get viruses, by the way. And so I'm going to have that removed because it's got a weak root structure, and I'm going to plant a couple trees in its place, like in my front yard. So all these people who are like, well, what are you doing? Well, I'm planting trees. What are you doing? Well, nothing. And then I'm like, okay, well, that's, you know, This
Man,
is
that's
like,
decent of you, dude. That's
I'm
decent.
not the guy to
I
argue
don't
with
give a
about
shit. I'll
that.
be honest. I don't give a shit about the planet. I'm like hoping that like I can leave the world a shittier place when I die. Like when I die, like bury me somehow where I like am infecting the earth, you know? Like something that will like fuck up the earth
I
worse,
think
you know? Like
cremating is the best way to do that, right?
really cremating? Is
That's
that's
one way, yeah.
not good for the planet? You're
I'll probably
causing
get one of
like
my
emissions in the air. No, no.
yeah, yeah,
Put me
yeah.
in a carburetor like
And then
after I'm
dump
like
your ashes.
ash.
Yeah. Turn me into a like I don't know. Yeah. Do put you use you as like a form of fossil fuel or something.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah.
just mix my ashes in with the fuel as you go and drive your dually uh 0 miles to the gallon truck or whatever.
Yeah,
um
yeah.
Now I'll probably do that thing where they like they like turn you into a tree or whatever, like they
Really?
put your ashes into like this box that you bury, and then it sprouts this fucking tree, and then you become like a
No,
tree or whatever.
you know what is really cool that I've seen that they can do now with this like is they can turn your ashes into a gem. Have you seen that? That is fucking
No,
badass, dude. You could get your ashes turned into a gem and they look cool, dude. It's like jewelry. Like wouldn't that be crazy?
I
Like
had
you could like
teased.
I'll get my ashes turned into a gem and then send it to you and be like, this is my dying wish is that you wear this for the rest of your
And I'm
life.
just
And I'll
walking
make
around
it
with
like
this
an earring or
gigantic ring on my finger. I'm like, yep, this is my bud. He got
yeah,
turned into
this
a
is me
gem.
right here. He's on my
There
finger.
was a for a while I was joking with somebody that I would be cremated, and then I would have my ashes turned like mixed in with that almost like that clay or whatever, or the die cast type stuff, like mix it in with the metal, and then turn me into little figurines that were haunted, and then just distribute them to people freely or whatever, and then I would just haunt the shit out of all these places. But yeah, that's this giant
That's a,
monster here, and let's see, the giant monster. You know what it reminded me of? Like if you take a good look at it and memorize that image, and then I thought of the movie The Mist. Remember at the end where like this gigantic monster walks over them while they're driving, and that was the first thing I thought of.
I've never seen. I don't know what
Oh
you're
well,
talking
I
about. The
just
mist.
spoiled the ending for you. There's monsters up
Oh,
there,
it
whatever.
looks like a treant. You know about the treants
Nuh-uh.
from the ancient from the trying to think of a good reference from the Lord of the Rings.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. The tree. Yeah, okay, I got you.
Called
Um,
Trent. Actually, I think they're called Trents. I don't know if they're called Treant. Maybe it is Treant or Ent. Ent is what it is. There's got to be a nerd out there that can like correct me on this. Come on, nerds. Where are you
nerds,
at? I think it's
nerds
Ents.
assemble.
Yeah, nerds assemble.
But
You know, they're like tree people. You
yeah,
know,
yeah, like
giant.
I know who you're talking about. The trees that walk, through the whole thing. Even like Dante from, or no, I'm sorry, not Dante. Randall on Clerks 2. He's like, all they do in those movies is walk. Here's the first one, and it shows him walking across the thing. He's like, here's the second one. Ugh, walk, and then here's the third one. Then he turns around and walks away. And he's like, even the second one, even the trees walked. And then the dude ends up yakking. Did you ever see that movie, Clerks 2?
I remember Rosario Dawson being in it.
Oh
She's
yeah,
hot.
she's
I saw it when it came out. You know, I really like Rosario Dawson. I like Kevin Smith's movies too, but not enough to like watch them more than once.
oh yeah, I
Except for
do.
Jay and Silent Bob, with the exception of
Yeah, Jay and Silent Bob
excluding.
Strike Back was arguably one of his better ones, and that's just because it's so like vulgar. Like the whole movie, you're like, I really like the Jay and Silent Bob scenes from the other movies, and then he's like, well, maybe I'll have them in more of one, and so like Dogma, they were in throughout the whole movie, and then people are
Right.
like, I really liked all the Jay and Silent Bob shit, so he's like, well, I guess let's make a Jay and Silent Bob movie or whatever, and then he did. God bless him. And
Yeah.
this is the other one. I almost met those guys the other day, but they had to cancel the convention that was in Cincinnati. I was going to go up and meet all the people from the Jay and Silent Bob movies. Here's another image that I thought of whenever I saw that picture. Just because like big monsters, like I'm into that. I think like big monsters are they're scary. I mean, that's like my rule, right, with nature is if I can stomp it to death, it doesn't scare me. And so that includes like snakes, dogs, any kind of like spiders and shit. Like any of those
Mhm.
animals or whatever, or even like cows. Like you could realistically stomp a cow to death because they've got really thin legs. You can kick out the knee, and then once it goes down, stomp its head to death or its neck. And, like, all these animals you can stomp to death. Now, like a giant monster like this, I think that's an issue. Like, you can't stomp that monster to death. So big monsters like this, and I mean, this is stuff that would make the news, right? Here's another one. This is stuff that would make the news. So even if, like, it was happening in Russia or China or some, like, the furthest place away from us, Australia even, especially Australia would be great because you'd be like, well, it's secluded to that island. Like, that's not a problem for me. But, like, if it happened in those places, you're like, man, these things are real. This is a problem, you know. I think of that VHS movie. I think it was VHS 2, where they, like, summon this demon, and this demon ends up, like, coming out of the building that they summoned it at, and it, like, lands on this dude's car, and the dude's filming the whole time. But, like, he sees it, and then the guy who's watching this VHS, like, it doesn't dawn on him, like, that thing is still out there. This is a problem. Like, that's the sort of thing that I have with these big monsters.
I like the idea of giant monsters, because that gives us the idea that, like, it might be time to start building, like, mechs, you know, like Pacific Rim. Or like Gundam, you know, like start building these machines that we can sit in and pilot. That's my dream. If they're ever, like, they started, like, the military started a program where they're like, we're come pilot a giant mech, then I would petition to get back into the military because I would love to pilot one of those things. That would be badass. And if we're gonna have these gigantic kaiju, as the Japanese call them, then I'm all in, dude. I'm all in. Yeah. Like, give me a giant mech and I'll do it. You know,
I would be the logistics guy who's just like, hey, let me support you guys, because, like, I have no interest in getting into a mech. I don't want to fuck that type of machinery up, because that's like, remember, like, when I joined the Army, they were like, well, there's, like, all these really cool jobs, and they were listing off all these jobs. I did really well on the ASVAB, so, like, everything was open to me, and they were like, well, the UAV pilot is a new thing. And I was like, dude, oh, yeah, right. cool, UAV pilot, right on. And he's like, yeah, you control the, you know, the little drone base. Well, they're not little, they're massive or whatever. But he's like, you control it from a trailer in the middle of the desert. Like, you know, and I'm like, oh, that sounds like a great job. How much is the machine worth, like the actual drone itself? And he's like, oh, millions of dollars, man. And I was like, pass. I was like, I don't trust myself with, like, a $20,
because then you break it and you, like, owe the military, like, millions of dollars. Right. You're like, I accidentally crashed it, my bad. Like, I accidentally crash a giant mech, and they're like, dude, like, we're taking your paycheck for, like, that. I'd probably still do it. You know what? I'd honestly drive a mech for free. Like, even if I wasn't getting paid for it, they're like, let me just do it. Like, I'll do that. I don't care. But then I crash it, and they're like, yeah, you caused millions of dollars of damage.
So that's you brought up a good point, the doing it for free. I think that would be the point in time where, like, real socialism would kick in, right?
Yeah.
Where, you know, all of a sudden the entire world is faced with this issue, which would be like a gigantic Lovecraftian monster, like this thing right here, right? You know, like, the world is faced with this giant monster, and we all have to band together, right? And they need people to come and help. And what good is money in a world like right now? For the time being, we saw how quickly Congress, like, kicked out $1,200 just for nothing. Right. Like, oh, hey, we know you're going through hard times. Here's a fucking $1,200 bonus or whatever for existing. Good job. Like, we saw how quickly, and then we saw how quickly they turned around and they were like, well, let's do $3 trillion this time. Yeah. Let's give everyone the same thing or whatever. Like, we see how quickly money gets kicked out or whatever. And in an emergency, which isn't really even an emergency, I mean, I think we can sit here and argue that coronavirus wasn't an emergency, and it was over exaggerated in many ways.
Way over exaggerated.
But
way over exaggerated.
But in a situation like this, where we had a very real threat of, like, a gigantic monster or an alien invasion or something, people would chip in. Like, that's like guys like you brought this up the other day. Yeah, you brought this up the other day. It's like, instinctively, it's our duty as men to hop in the mech suit, right? And we would do that.
I totally agree with you. I'm 100% in agreement with you.
So we
I
will.
think we would just naturally go, you know what, dude, it's time. It's like that moment, I always say, when the apocalypse come, man, let me know. I'll get my katana, bro. And like that's just gonna happen.
Right.
Like I'll get this text from you that's like it's time,
We
and then
gotta
I'll go
go.
get my katana. And then
Dust
that's
it
it,
off. Dust the
we
katana off. We gotta go fight demons and shit.
yeah,
But I think
exactly.
that's when real socialism would happen. Like all of a sudden, and this brings me to a good point that um, that's what's going to happen. Okay, remember we talked about Wag the Dog the other day, or you brought it up in passing.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what's going to happen. Is we're going to have this. I think that's probably what coronavirus was an attempt at, but everybody like immediately saw through it. Was like
Right.
finding this thing where we could be like, oh, we need to all come together and become this united. We need to get behind the United Nations and form a
Yeah, we
one
are
world
the
government and all this bullshit. I think
right.
that's what coronavirus was supposed to be. And I think it
Hmm.
failed because everyone was like, "What? This is not right." Like, you guys realize we can read, right? Like, that's easy. Like back in the 1800s when like not everybody could read, but like now everybody has immediate access to information as it's happening, and like now they fuck themselves because nobody believes the news anymore, because they tried all this other stuff before they tried this, and now we have the coronavirus. We have all the data, and we have access to the internet where we can just share everything in real time, and like all of a sudden like nobody's buying into it. So I think that's what's going to happen is we're going to have to be faced with a legitimate threat, or they're going to have to, the world government overlords, right? The Illuminati and the whoever, like
Hmm.
whoever all is in charge of this attempt to
Tom
George
Hanks.
Soros. Yeah, Tom Hanks is one of them.
George
Um,
Soros.
George Soros, right? He's gonna like call upon his reptilian overlords and whoever, like the aliens that we're in contact with. They're gonna be like, hey, you guys need to stage like a legit invasion on the world, and I don't care really how many people get killed. Frankly, we just need to kind of like come together and put up a little bullshit fight, and then like you guys
You
can
know what it
fly
makes me
off.
think of is remember Watchmen? Remember Watchmen? How at the end that's what it all ended up being was just this thing that um, Ozymandias created. Like it wasn't even like a real thing. He just like created this issue that would bring the world together, and then
Mm,
like Dr. Manhattan was like, "Yeah, I can't stop this because it's good for the world." And
right.
like so he just like let it happen.
I think
There's
that's
like
what
an
it's going to be. I
explosion.
think we're going to have to deal with that, and that's it's going to be whether it be a gigantic mountain monster or whether it be another coronavirus type thing. I mean, there's enough information out there about this coronavirus that should lead everyone to be like, well, this was all bullshit. This is just an imaginary thing. Um, that like
Well, it's
it would
funny.
have to
My
be
dad and I
something
were talking
legitimate,
about
like a
this
big
recently,
monster.
where it was like we were talking about, well, what happened in this situation, and the economy all of a sudden changed, and it was all good again. And in every instance, it's always been war. Like, well, that's why war makes the economy better. And so I think in this case, I don't know why they thought like a disease would make the economy better. Like that's to me just retarded. But then like you go, well, let's just start having some war, and then our economy will get better because we'll get rid of some some trash. We'll have some calling, and
Right.
you know,
Yeah, we'll get rid of some brown people and then the white people will flourish. I mean, that's the nature of like war. That's what it is, and I mean that's how we do it. And mostly, unfortunately, like it's very difficult to get in on that racket. You have to like invest in whoever gets the contract to like KBR, right? And that was I think Cheney's brothers company or something. But KBR was like the company that was in charge of rebuilding Iraq and sustaining the war. So like anybody who had stock in KBR did great. Anybody, like you have to know though, and you have to be real quick. You have to either be in the know or catch on real quick and invest in that particular organization before it kicks off or before it takes off. So, are you still there?
hmm
Okay.
I'm here.
Let's talk about. So we were talking about big monsters, right? Let's talk about little monsters then. Let's since we've got everyone thinking that we're going to talk about kaiju and shit. Let's talk about little monsters, little Japanese
Oh
monsters.
yeah, we haven't really even addressed what we're supposed to be talking about.
No,
We
this is
kind
the
of
best we've
have
ever
been
done.
ranting. Yeah, we've kind of been ranting. Well, kaiju is the essentially like the giant monster, right? The Japanese giant monster, like Godzilla, the dreaded Godzilla.
Gojira.
And then like, but that's like a film thing, like that kind of like came into existence with Godzilla and like interestingly, it was kind of like a way for them to deal with like being nuked. I know
Hmm.
it's I know it's kind of like inappropriate, but that's what happened. Like they got nuked and then like they had to deal with it some way, and so they started doing cinema, which I'll be honest with you, man, the Japanese, they have some amazing cinema. If you know anything about uh what's his name? I want to say Akira Kurosawa. Akira Kurosawa, dude, Seven Samurai. He's
Yeah.
made some amazing films. But then we have the kaiju, but there's the alternate, the actual spirits, I guess you could call them in Japanese culture, which is yokai, which is essentially what we'll be talking about tonight, right? The yokai, which is kind of like classifies all like paranormal um in their, I guess, I don't want to say religion, but their kind of like
Culture.
culture, I
Yeah.
guess. Yeah, their culture. Yeah. And so, which encompasses more than just spirits, it's like demons are considered yokai too, which
Hmm.
is funny because um demons to them aren't like these, like we think demons, we think, oh, they're these evil things that are trying to like send you to hell, but for them, for Japanese, it's more of like a mischievous, like demons aren't evil, they're just like mischievous, or they have like some sort of motive that like is usually selfish, right? It's not revolving around one devil, it's more like they're all devils. I think even in some of the old literature, they're like good demons, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I think it's an interesting topic. I'm a big fan of Japanese culture, so this is like a fun topic for me. Excuse me.
You know, yeah, daemons, like originally like in like Greek and Roman times or whatever, and they had like the daemons, and that was who. And I mean, even if you play like the Elder Scrolls games, the Daedra or whatever are the demons, and they're not necessarily. And this is where like I butt heads with some people who care enough to have to butt heads with me about it. Is like demons. I don't think necessarily are demons like bad. Um, I think they can be in the same way that like people are not necessarily bad, but they can be. Like they made a bad decision and now they're living this existence as a creature that is not an angel. It's essentially an angel, but they're no longer within the confines of like the glory of God. They live here with
Right.
us on earth and they still have the powers of angels and all that, but they are kind of seen as bad because they're seen as the enemy, right? But at the same time,
Yeah.
they do offer help. And I mean, we've talked to Dave about this a number of times. We've talked extensively about this. They offer this ability to do these things through like divination, through so whether tarot cards, astronomy, or astrology. Astronomy is studying stars.
Astrology.
Astrology is the
Astronomy.
made up one. Um,
Yeah.
tarot cards, Ouija boards, all that stuff, like
Yeah.
divination and shit, and then like giving you special abilities and gifts and all that crap. Like they do good things for people, but like at what cost, right? So not
Hmm.
necessarily is it a bad thing to the people who use it. They're like, well, I know the risks, and okay, whatever, that's on you. Um, but so I think like it's similar in that my opinion of demons is that they can be bad because they can do some really gnarly shit and they can do some really bad stuff to people. Yeah. And the types that you recognize are the ones who do bad stuff because those are like, if someone does something good for you, you're like, oh, like thanks to my guardian angel. And you're just like happy about it. But like if something bad happens, you're like, oh, it was a demon. But no one wants to talk about the demon who like hooked you up with fame and fortune being the bad guy. Um, but let me disclaimer that by saying I don't recommend doing that. I don't recommend like welcoming a demon into your life.
Yeah, no, not a good idea,
Um,
probably.
but speaking of demons, who's this handsome fella? That's an oni. What's an
It's an
oni?
Oni. Well, Oni, okay, that's an interesting you could say that an Oni is like a demon, but a lot of people also say that an Oni is like an ogre, like ogres, the big giant things. Interestingly, Onis are a common tattoo for the Yakuza, because it's, terrifying. And it's also like what they would use for like samurai masks, like the Kabuto. They put the Oni mask on their helmet, and so it kind of makes them like demonic, I guess you could say. So in a general sense, an Oni is basically like a demon, but a lot of people say they're like ogres too, because
Hmm.
like there's more than one type of demon, I guess you could say.
Right.
but an oni is essentially like a troll or an ogre. Yeah, I think ogre is probably the closest thing, maybe.
You know, I play Dead by Daylight. It's a fun game on PlayStation. I think it's free. If not, you missed your window because I don't really pay for video games on PlayStation, like the ones that you can download and shit. Rare exceptions would be like Doom Eternal and shit, but uh, like I don't pay for stuff. But Dead by Daylight was free, but then they have like a lot of in-app purchases that you can make, like costumes for your guy, which are like totally unnecessary. Like anything that you buy in that game is like extra characters, like the new characters and shit that they come out with, which you can also buy with stuff that you've earned in the game. Which is what I do. Is I just like I save up in preparation for the new characters or whatever. But some of their licensed characters, like Ash from Evil Dead, I think the fucking
Oh,
Demogorgon
oh yeah,
from
that's pretty cool.
yeah, the Demogorgon from Stranger Things. And then there's like a pyramid head from Silent Hill is coming out for the killer, one of the killers. But anyways, the Oni was one of the new killers that they just released, and he's like this bulky, like demon guy, and he's pretty fucking scary actually. He's one of the killers that like I think like if you saw him, you'd be like, oh, that's a pretty scary killer. Like the rest of them are like the doctor, the witch, or not the witch, the hag, the trapper, just like weird serial killer characters or whatever. But yeah, Oni was one of the killers, and he's definitely one of the more scary ones. There was another one that I wanted to ask you about before I jump into mine. I have yours separate. I'll burn through mine, and then you burn through yours. Who's this
Okay.
fella?
Is that the we talked about this one? Didn't we talk about this one
Yeah, the
before?
Okaburo.
Yeah, it's like this the weeping lady or whatever, right?
The
Is
no,
that
this
this
is
one?
the tranny, or no, I'm sorry, the cross-dressing
Oh,
one.
the cross dresser. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah,
yokai
it's
of
a
a
cross
cross-dresser.
cross dressing. Yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
that's a funny one.
you know, before we jump into this, you had mentioned something about there being like different types or whatever. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I noticed as I was going through the list of like uh, the Japanese legendary creatures or whatever, is that
Hmm.
like we have, right? I mean, we have ghosts, so they're like dead people, right? We
Hmm.
have poltergeists, you know, which we don't. I mean, like are like the energy, the telekinetic energies of whatever that knock shit over and you know open and slam doors, turn stuff on and off or whatever, just to be loud. Like noisy ghosts is what it literally translates to from German. And then we've got like demons, which we kind of associate as a different entity, and then
Hmm.
spirits kind of like encompasses it all, right? Um,
Right.
now that's what we use for like all of our paranormal experiences that is related to ghosty type shit.
Yeah.
Now, the Japanese have a different name for everything. Like
Yeah.
there was like Abura Sumashi, a spirit with a large head who lives on a mountain pass. Akabeku, a red cow involved in the construction of Enzojin and Yazanai Fukushima. Um, Akumantu, a ghost in a red mantle that offers either red or blue toilet paper roll in toilets. Like I mean, just like and like the
Yeah.
weirdest shit. And then
It's
like
everything. Like everything has a
yeah,
spirit with Japanese culture. Everything.
and a ghostly
Yeah. That,
fire, a spirit. Oh, I won't read that one because we're going to talk about that one. A creature that looms over a black cloud in a floodgate. I mean, these are like so. Like, if there's a story about it, you know, kind of like how we do the girl. I don't know, like the girl who died on prom night or whatever, and like stands by the side of the
Mhm.
road. Like they have a name for that specific type of ghost,
Right.
and
Exactly.
it's
Yeah.
pretty
Yeah.
cool. And I think we're going to get into
Yeah.
that. So everybody who's at home wondering what we're really going to talk about for real is these yokai. We're going to talk about V and I actually created our own teams for our
I
yokai
didn't think of it
watches.
like that, but now that you put it like that, it makes it way more fun. It's like our
Um,
Pokemans.
right, right. We're getting ready to go fight at the gym with our yokai
Yeah, that's right.
watch. I don't know what the yokai kid does. My kids used to watch that show all the time, and like we have so much yokai watch shit all over the house. Like they used to have the little yokai, and I didn't know what it was. I was like, oh, it's a cute little Pokemon cartoon. Now I realize like
Yeah.
they were summoning the Black Death of a mounted military commander who worked for Yamata no Orichi. Um, but now I know, so now I know better.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, like I totally recommend going through this list of like legendary creatures if you're curious about like some of the weird shit, because there are some really fascinating yokai that
Mhm.
you can learn all about, like the Abura Akago. All right. Now, what is the Abura Akago? It translates, and I forgive me because I'm going to pronounce every one of these names wrong, but it translates literally to the oil baby, and it's an infant ghost who licks the oil out of andon lamps. Now, the natives say that long ago in the village of Shiga there was an oil merchant, and every night he stole the oil from Jiso of the Otsu crossroads. But when this person died, his soul became a flame, and even now they grow accustomed to this errant fire. I picked this one because a baby that eats lamp oil seemed funny to me.
It's so funny. Yeah, it's weird. Like, what would compel them to do that? Like, as a baby, first of all.
I don't know,
Yeah, that's
because it's a
odd.
baby. That's the thing about babies is
Yeah,
they want to
baby.
eat everything, I guess. That's why you got to chase your kids around when they're that age. You got to chase them around and say, "Get that out of your mouth."
People people don't know this, but it turns out that babies just really like lamp oil. It's
They
like, who would
instinctively
have thought?
flock to it. Yeah, it's like nectar of the gods for babies. Speaking of putting your tongue where it doesn't belong, here's the Aka name, which or Akaname, I assume,
Yeah,
which
economic.
translates to filth licker, spirit who licks off filth in untidy bathrooms. They are stated to lick the. Now you can see why I picked this one, right?
I know.
Um,
As we're going through, I get it.
yeah, you got to think like, why would Tom pick this one? Because it's either funny, it's gross, or it's perverted. Um, but they're stated to lick the filth that collects in bathtubs and bathrooms. In classic yokai depictions, children with clawed feet and cropped heads are depicted by the bath place sticking out a long tongue. Um, which like gets Quentin Tarantino and Jeffrey Epstein excited. Uh,
It's like
but
a good reason to not clean your bathroom, just so that you know some weird demon is gonna come
well,
clean
if
it
that
for
were
you.
true, there would be no gross bathrooms. So, like every single gas station that you go to would be spotless.
Yeah.
And there'd be a bunch of really fat Aka names or Akanames floating around there. Let's see. Oh, you know what? I would be doing a disservice if I didn't mention this, but Monster Porn, a podcast that we support, actually did an episode about this. It was one of their first episodes was about the Akaname, the filth liquor. And they do a lot of like real weird. They're not like us where like we just come on here and laugh and give out like information whether it's good or bad or true or false.
Yeah.
Like they do the little like old timey kind of like Octoberpod does. Like they do the old timey stories, the narrative based podcast.
Ah,
So I would recommend looking
not
into
like us.
that.
We just do the poop, dick, and fart jokes.
Yeah, we just do. Well, we do whatever we want. That's the way I see it, and
Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah.
that's the way it should be. You should always just do what you want. And then moving on, we have the Ashimagari, which is the leg turner, is what it translates to. A spirit which entangles the legs of travelers. The have a nice trip, see you next fall ghost, as I call it. It is a
That's a
soft
good one.
thing, thank you, like a kitten or a wad of cotton, which is felt wrapping itself around a person's leg at night, impeding the ability to walk. While it is not generally visible, it is often believed that it's a trick of the Tanuki, I'm sorry, and which is somebody
Tanuki,
that we're
yeah.
going to talk about here in a little bit. You know what I thought of as I was reading through these? Some of these I'm like why on earth would they have something like this, or why would they, like I wasn't judging them, but I was like trying to, in my mind I'm like trying to like see where this would have
Right,
come
right.
from, right? And I think of an American Haunting, I believe was the movie. Like this ghost supposedly exists, but it was only because it wasn't a ghost, it was actually the young girl was being raped by her dad. Like, and the story that came from that was there was a ghost who was beating up this chick and like messing with her and keeping her up at night and shit. Which I just spoiled the movie for you if you've never seen it. But then again, it's like 25 years old, so if you haven't seen it by
Nice.
now, it's too late. But like for this guy, the leg turner, right, the Ashimagari, I was thinking, I'm like, can you imagine like you're walking through the house late at night and you trip on nothing at all because you're clumsy or whatever and you're tired, and your wife's like, "What is the matter with you?" And you're like, "Oh, I think a ghost just tripped me." Like I think that's what probably happened. It was the Ashimagagi or whatever, and then like he just immediately created this imaginary ghost or whatever
It's like it makes more sense to me for it to be like some guy that's like just drunk all the time, and people are like, "Why can't you walk straight? Why can't you walk?" And he's like, "Well, it turns out there's this demon that's keeping me from
I hate
walking
to be the one to
straight."
tell you this, but have you ever heard of the Ashimagari? What?
Yeah.
Moving on, the Basan, a large fire-breathing chicken monster. Hard to pass that one up without bringing it up. According to the description on the illustration, it resembles a large chicken and breathes ghost fire from its mouth. It is described as having a bright red coxcomb, which is the thing on the top of the rooster's head, if you're wondering. Anybody who thinks
Right.
that's a funny word, shame on you. And spits an equally brilliant hued fire. The fire is a cold fire, a glow, and it does not burn. So if you ever come across this chicken in the forest, it's like it seems like it's totally harmless. Even the fire itself is not a real fire. The Dodemeki, a hundred-eyed demon.
Yeah, this one's pretty cool actually. I like this one.
Well, I hope that you can add more to it, because I'll just say the brief description and then you can kind of go from there. Depicted as a hungry woman or a human woman who is cursed with having long arms covered with hundreds of birds' eyes due to their habit of stealing money. So the long arms of the Dodemeki reflects the Japanese belief that a person with long arms has a tendency to steal. The bird eyes that grow on the Dodemeki's arms are a reference to the Japanese dosen, a copper coin with a hole in the middle of it that's commonly known as the chimoku, which is called the bird's eye. Yeah, that's like the brief description. What else do you have for us, V? Do you know more about this?
No,
Dodemeki?
that covers it right there.
Well, dang, I thought it was
I mean, other than this is like an actual yokai, like this one is classified as like an actual yokai. Like this one kind of existed because of something that happened. That it's kind of like, remember we talk about um, Dave Outlandish, and he says the P space, like we
Right.
make something become a thing because we talk about it, and then all of a sudden, so it's kind of like that's kind of essentially how yokai are. Where like this one, the hundred eyed demon, is that what it is? Hundred eyed the Dodemeki, right?
Yep, yep,
Dodemeki.
yep.
It kind of became a thing because it was like talked about in tales or whatever, and then like or myths or whatever you want to call it, and then it went from like, is this a true story or was it a real story or whatever, and then next thing you know, it's like a legend, right?
Right.
And it becomes a yokai, right? So it's something that is essentially a spirit that was created because of a story, which is like it's funny because that's what Dave Outlandish always used to tell us, like these things can become real because we made them real, like our J-Rab.
Right.
Fucking
Our creative
J-Rab.
demon. That makes me wonder, like, how do you so like if you want to create a legend, right, or you want to create this tale and skew the understanding of whether or not it's a story or whether or not it's true, the best thing you can do is spread it and then die, right? Because if you spread a story, because if you try to trace back a story, you can only go back so far, because the people who told the people who told the people who told you, that person's long dead. So you can't go back and be like, "Hey man, level with me. Like, is this a real thing? Like, where did you hear it? Oh, I made it up. Or, oh, well, I saw it with my own eyes and blah 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 blah." So like the people who heard about it, they're just like, in their own mind, they know of this creature and they see shit that kind of looks like it, or they hear about something and they're like, "Oh, that sounds like the Dodeki," or whatever. You can't go back far enough. So the trick to creating a legend is to create it and then die. So that is not an advocation for suicide, but I will say, like, if you plan on doing it, do it on your deathbed. Like, start telling people, like, when you're real old, like, "Oh man, I remember when I was a kid, my grandfather," or even like do that. It'd be like, "Well, my grandfather told me the story about so and so. Well, I'm gonna go talk to your grandfather. Well, good luck, because he's dead. He's been long since like '94. So
Right.
yeah, they'll never know, and then you just have to keep your lips shut until you die, and then the legend lives on forever. So that's how you do it, folks. We just gave you, that's, if you take anything from us, take that, like, run with that and create a bunch of fake legends and shit.
Yeah, just do what you can, and then maybe one day they'll actually exist.
Yeah. And then, people will, or then you end up with like that Pazuzu guy. I was watching a documentary about him. I got to take it back to me. I was watching a documentary about this Pazuzu guy, right? Pazuzu was like this old demon back in Middle East, way back when. And he like this dude in, I want to say it was California. I assume any weird thing that happens, it's usually in California. But this dude, like, he was like a cannibal and like just this dirty person who lived in his own filth. He never cleaned up his house. He never showered. He'd have people come over and they wouldn't shower, and everybody just stunk. And they like lounge around in their own filth, and like, and when I say filth, I mean literally like shit and urine and all that. And then they ended up like murdering somebody. But this dude, like, if you look at Pazuzu, and maybe I'll pull up a picture later while you're talking, he's got like, he filed his teeth down, and he has tattoos all on his face, and his hair's all dreadlocks, which is like the sign of like, I'm a dirty person, I don't know how to shower and bathe. Like, you can't really wash your hair if you want dreadlocks, and that's a fact.
This is true.
I'm just saying. But yeah, like this, he just like made himself look absolutely filthy, and that was his thing that he was doing. It was like his gimmick that he wanted to create, or his image that he wanted to create, and he succeeded, because now he's like, I think he's probably dead now, but I think he was in prison. He was at least arrested for the murder of a bunch of people, because he buried him out in the backyard, and then they found all the bodies when somebody ratted on him. This guy right here is the Funayrei, Funayrei, the boat spirit, and it's just the ghosts of people who died at sea. So this is kind of like what we would call just like ghosts on the ocean, or ghosts of old sailors. Like, that's what we would call them. These guys have a name for it, the boat spirit, and they're ghosts believed to use hishaku, or ladles, to fill boats with water and make them sink. They are said to be the remnants of people who have died in shipwrecks and are attempting to cause humans to join them. And what's funny about this is, like, this again sounds like somebody who just didn't do proper upkeep on his boat, and then the captain came down and he's like, hey, what the fuck, why are we sinking? And he's like, oh, you know what, it was one of them boat spirits. Like, he's pouring with his ladle.
He's just like blind.
How did he do it? Well, he used a ladle. Oh, all right. Well, gosh darn Funare, or whatever you called them. And there goes my printer. It must be set to a timer or something, because like every time we're down
here, FBI, dude. They're just checking on us.
That's what
like, they're not talking about anything weird this week, so we'll just check on them real quick.
I'm missing one.
What else you got?
I got plenty. Sir, I am only halfway done here. No, I'm a little more than halfway done. For those of you at home who are upset that I'm still droning on. This motherfucker still. Gasha Dekuro. Now this one's fun for me. Just because, again, I talked about it at the beginning of the episode. Big things, like when something is bigger than it's supposed to be, that's unsettling. And you can't stomp this guy to death. This is the starving skeleton, or so the Gasha Dekoru, or Odakuru, which means giant skeleton. It's a giant skeleton that is the spirit of the unburied dead. They're spirits that take the form of giant skeletons and are 15 times taller than an average person, and to be created from the amassed bones of people who died of starvation or in battle without being buried. So I know the Japanese, I believe they have like a big thing about like respecting the dead, right? Is that right, V?
That's a badass picture, by the way. Yeah, they do. Yeah, they do.
Tell us more about. Can you explain that? Because that's what that sounds like to me. Like, oh, this is hey, we need to respect Grandpa's wishes to be buried properly with all these honors, or else he's going to turn into the Ogadushu, or the Ogadushu. He's going to come back as a gigantic skeleton, and he's going to fuck with you. So, like, could you describe that a little bit more? Because you know more about the Japanese culture than I do.
It's just, it's essentially kind of like, it's a lot like actually Mexican culture, where they like really honor their dead, and like it's like they don't have like what we call the Dia de los
Dia de los
Muertos, the Day of the
Muertos, yeah.
Dead. Yeah, they don't have anything like that because that's just how they always are. Like they always
Right.
like for example, like there's this faux pas you want to make sure you don't do if you're ever in Japan, and you're eating with chopsticks. You don't ever want to put them straight up in the like. You don't ever want to stick them in the rice like straight up because it symbolizes like a what are the tombstone, it's like death, it's like a reference to
Mm.
death, so it's like a bad omen or whatever. But everything is just the culture really, like you could say it's about honoring the dead, but that's just their culture. It's all about honoring each other. Shame is a horrible thing in their culture. Like a Japanese culture, the way to describe them is that they would rather lie than shame someone or feel shame. And so like so that's like the most important thing to them. And so anything having to do with honor or respect, which is really like, let's be honest, that's a cool way of thinking because everything that they do involves that. And so you don't ever have like a weird dealing with, like, it's weird, man. Like when I was over there, dude, like it tripped me out how like you could go into a McDonald's and everybody treats you like they're your waiter or they're your butler. And that's like not even exaggerating, like, oh, that you walk in and they're bowing to you, like what, like that's crazy, man. Like what kind of culture like bows to each other? Like how is that still a thing? Like it seems like when you think about it, it seems silly, but then when you think about like what it represents and the amount of respect that comes from it to bowing, like it's not just like nodding your head at somebody. Like if you're showing great respect to somebody, you bow, you make your body horizontal. Like that's huge. They even do. Here's something interesting too, is they prostrate themselves when they're feeling shame. So like we talk about bowing where they like really put their bodies horizontal, but also when they like say I disrespected you, right? And like we're at our house and we're sitting on our knees in seiza, right? That's what it's called, where you're sitting on your knees facing each other. And like if I had to apologize to you for like disrespecting you, I would literally put my hands on the ground and then put my head on the ground to show you that that's how ashamed I was. Is
Mm.
that like I'm willing to like bow that much, and it's funny too, there's like a joke in Japanese culture where like how close can you get to the ground to be like that shamed, right? So like in weeb culture they kind of joke about it where like they're literally like a plank on the ground and that's how shamed they are. There's even like there's an internet culture thing. Do you remember ORZ? Do you remember that? There was like an internet leet speak, whereas ORZ, capital ORZ. I'll write it in the chat so that people can get what I'm saying. Um, if you take a look at the ORZ, I don't know if you know this. This is like elite speak thing among like MMO culture. If you look at the word "ors" like as the capitals, it actually resembles a person on their knees bowing, and that's
Oh
actually
yeah.
what the word "ors" is supposed to be. Is that person, like when you say "ors," you're not saying "ors," you're saying like I'm showing respect, is what it is.
Huh.
So I guess to answer your question, it's not necessarily that they like respect the dead, it's that they respect everything, has so much honor, and everything is, you don't want to disrespect anything. So when it comes to like like evil spirits, like the worst thing that you can do to a Japanese evil spirit is disrespect it, because that gives them reason for like revenge and you know what have yous. So I hope that answered your question a little bit.
It did. Um, Pretty fascinating stuff, and people actually got something useful out of today's episode. I think
The
some
ors.
some cultural knowledge or whatever of the Japanese people. This right here, speaking of people you don't want to offend as a vengeful spirit, this is Hanako-san, or Tiore no Hanko-san, Hanako of the toilet is what it's called. The spirit of a young World War II era girl who inhabits and haunts school restrooms. Spirit of a young girl named Hanako-san who haunts school bathrooms. Legend about Hanako-san has achieved some popularity in old Japanese schools where children may challenge classmates to try to summon Hanako-san. So she's kind of like the Japanese Bloody Mary.
Right, right.
And the last person that
Yeah,
you
that's a
want
good
to
comparison.
come visit with you, or that you want to, the last thing that you want when you are in the bathroom is to have some dead Japanese girl come and I don't know, whatever it is dead Japanese girls do. Now there's some people
Scare
who
the shit
probably
out of you.
would. Yeah, there's probably some people who would probably summon that sort of thing, like Joe Biden. Can you imagine him in the bathroom? Hanako-san, Hanako-san, Hanako-san. Um, come
Is
blow
that how you
my,
summon it?
come. I
Just
don't know.
like
I
Bloody
don't know.
Mary.
Come, come blow my old geriatric dick on the toilet. Give me a
Uh,
blumpkin.
oh, dude.
This is the Hibagon, the Japanese version of the Bigfoot or the Yeti, the Japanese equivalent of the North American Bigfoot or the Himalayan Yeti. Sightings have been reported since the 1970s around Mount Hiba in the Hiroshima prefecture. So
Mhm.
you had said something about the Japanese Bigfoot, and I thought, well, there is a Japanese Bigfoot. Like I have that
Mhm.
character saved for you too, for when you're talking. And we're on the final stretch for my guys, so believe me, guys, it's not much left that you have to put up with me before you get to listen to V. Um, this right here is the Akiryo, which literally means the living ghost. Essentially,
Ikirio.
oh, okay, good. See, that's how you pronounce it. Then I'm gonna not say it again. I'll just say living ghost because I'll butcher it. I want the good version to stick in people's heads. Uh, so essentially, a living ghost, as it is a living person's soul outside of their body, it refers to a spirit that leaves the body of a living person and subsequently haunts other people or places, sometimes across great distances. The term is used in contrast to shiryo, which refers to the spirit of those who are already deceased. So even we were joking earlier about the Japanese have a ghost for everything. Like they even have a ghost for ghosts of people who are not dead, and that's what this one is. It's I guess like somebody's astral projection, kind of.
Yeah,
Would be the best
well,
way to
it's
describe
interesting.
it.
There's a Japanese anime called JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. I don't know if anybody out there watches it, but they call it a stand, and it's like essentially like you're I guess you could call it a persona. Like it's a part of you, but like it has qualities that you don't possess, I guess you could say, or maybe like enhanced qualities that you possessed.
So
Um,
like a Tyler
I don't know.
Durden.
Yeah, kind of. I guess that's a kind of a way to like look at it is like a second personality or like a manifestation of like what you wish you were, I guess. But instead of it being like a split personality, it's like an actual like ghost or something.
Hmm.
It's cool if you there's a great anime called JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and they have these and they're called stands and it's really man the way they do it. If anybody out there is an anime fan, I urge you to watch JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. It's a great anime.
I hear
There's
a
my
lot
nerd
about it. It
moment,
comes up. It
my
comes up
weep.
a lot
Yeah,
on
it's a good
Twitter.
one. It's a good one. They have a meme that goes with it too. So what else you got?
Hold on, I'm pouring my drink. Bear with
You
me. I'm
best.
refreshing. I'm refreshing my beverage. It's always funny how like the second drink, no matter how much I'm drinking rum and cokes today. Um,
Oh
it's
man,
been a while. Uh,
I'm a fan. Although I don't drink, I have to remind people. I think somebody Jeff quarantined.
yep, yep.
Who is Jeff quarantined? Is that one of our
I don't
regular
think
regular?
he actually like watches the show. He doesn't join us live. I don't know if he watches it later or not. I don't know the people
Uh,
who watch it later or not because it doesn't tell me. It just tells me who's here
it,
when we're live. Which, by the
well, he
way, uh,
yeah.
hi, Mike in Manitoba, Jay Coop, Ryan Tremblay, King Cracker, Gil was here for a little while. I don't know if he's still out there. Buzz Busby and Let's Fish Already, and I think that's it. I think that's
Did you
all
get
the people.
Megabit Banshee?
Oh, there he is. Hi, Megabit. Yeah,
Yeah.
those are the people who typically who like hi you guys, but the people who watch later, I don't know who they are.
Well,
But
I had to. The
he's a
reason
friend of
why I
mine
brought that up
who.
was because he had said something about like he had a barbecue and whatever, and I was like, oh, cool. I did the thumbs up, and then he was like, yeah, come on out and this, and that. And he's like, oh, in a bar too, and then like I always feel bad because I have to decline booze because I don't drink, I don't do any of that stuff. I'm sober 3 years, but the other day I went to my dad's house for dinner. And his wife made these like whiskey cupcakes.
Mm.
And she didn't tell me that there was whiskey in them. And she's like, here, try this. And I was like, man, this is delicious. And then I like tasted it and I was like, there's booze in this, isn't there? And then she was like, oh yeah, there's whiskey in it. And I was like, oh man, I was like 3 years sober. I was like, you're ruining everything.
You're
Which,
dead to me.
obviously I didn't go jump down the bottle or anything, but it was like a funny thing because like the thing that like broke my 3 years sober was a cupcake.
You fat ass.
Yeah.
Um, oh, by the way, to V's continued sobriety, congratulations. We'll say that on the air. I
Yeah.
don't know if you've ever said that, like how long you've been, how many chips you've got, but
3 years in June it'll be, so I'm technically 2 and 11 months, I think.
yeah, we'll count it. We round up here. The Inugami, the dog god or spirit. The dog spirit created, worshipped, and employed by a family via sorcery. It's a spiritual possession by the spirit of a dog, widely known about in Western Japan. I like how they like distinguish northern. Well, I guess northern and southern makes sense, but like Eastern and Western Japan, isn't it like a 20-minute walk from like one coast to the other?
Pretty much. They have, well, their prefectures are like way different. The cultures like kind of vary too. Like it's hard to explain, but um how do I explain it? It's like there is like different culture. They even have different dialects too. It's interesting. They have different culture, and as small as it is, it's funny. I think it's like as big as California. That's how big Japan is.
Huh.
To me, that's not very big, but they do. They have different cultures, different dialects. You could speak Japanese and go to Tokyo and kind of understand like I speak like a little bit, like enough to get by, but like if like when I went to Osaka, the dialect is completely different. So a lot of words they use are like slang. To me, it made no sense. Like I was like, I don't know what the fuck these people are saying because they're using like slang. It'd be like going from like California where everybody says dude and like and all and whatever, and then going to New York where they say, hey, look, forget about it.
Hey,
So it's
don't
like a
walk in
different,
here.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So the dialects are a little different, but like the slang is, I guess Ebonics would be like fucking the base comparison.
Yeah.
I don't
Or
know
even
if
like
that's
going up north into the, um, like up where I'm from in Wisconsin. Hey there, how you doing there? You want to go fishing there? Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Let's see here. We got the Jikiniki, human-eating ghosts, ghosts that eat human corpses. The spirits of greedy, selfish, or impious individuals who are cursed after death to seek out and eat human corpses. Now, this is one that, let's see here, also kind of like runs with the gaki or the preda as they're called, depending on the culture that you're in. And I kind of want to touch on that real quick. They're called the hungry ghost.
Hmm.
And so these are there are three main groups of hungry ghosts. Now these are cats who um, like it's almost like the Dante's Inferno of ghosts, because like depending on your what you were in life determines what you become in death. So there are like ghosts of no wealth, so the torch or flaming mouths, they regurgitate fierce flames, and they can't eat because of that. The needle mouths, they have little bitty tiny mouths, so they can't eat. And they suffer from hunger and thirst. The putrid mouths, who like give off a decomposing odor from their mouths, and they're like vomiting and shit, so they can't eat. And they run around screaming in anger because of it. Ghosts of little wealth, the needle hair, they have their whole body is covered in like firm spear-like hair. Putrid hair, they stink again, like covered in hair. Swollen, large protuberances grow out of their throats so that they have difficulty eating, but they like survive off of the pus and blood that comes from it. And then ghosts of much wealth, the ghosts of sacrifice, they live off of sacrifices offered by humans, which is like why people leave shit out for these hungry ghosts. Ghosts of losses, they're always covetous, searching out filth like vomit and feces to eat. Ghosts of great power, which includes the yakshas, the rakshasas, and the kumbandas, and they're powerful rulers, or spirits of powerful rulers. But that's kind of along the same lines, I guess.
Yeah.
So I kind of wanted to touch
Right.
on that real quick, and that's one that I was aware of beforehand. So I did want to talk briefly about that. What we have here is, and I don't want to butcher the name. Let me pull it up here. The jinmenju, the human face tree. It's a tree that's just got a bunch of human faces for the fruits. I brought this one up because while that's hilarious in and of itself, I think it's also important. Like some of these things, some of these monsters and beasts and ghosts and whatever, they come from this book called the Edo Period Konjaku Hayaki Shui by Toriyama Sakin, which his book translates to the supplement to the 100 demons from the present and the past. Now, these books are supernatural bestiaries, collections of ghosts, spirits, spooks, and monsters, many of which Toriyama based on literature, folklore, and other work. So, if you're looking into it, or if you want to look into more of these monsters or whatever, that book is like one of the good
Yeah.
places to start.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
And my last two, I'll burn through these real quick because they're funny. Uh, the Kamikiri, the hair cutter, the yokai that secretly cuts people's hair, um, said to secretly cut people's hair on their head, and it is thought that they would appear out of nowhere and cut people's hair on their heads without them noticing. So I think that's a good excuse for like people who are going bald, or people who got a shitty haircut and then like their spouse didn't care much for it, and they're like, oh, you know what? It was one of them kamikiris. And then the last one for me is the Nupepo, an animated lump of decaying human flesh. It is depicted with an indistinguishable wrinkles on its face and body as one head blob of meat. So I thought that one was pretty cool.
Yeah. Kind of
So
gross too.
yeah, V. Here's one of your teams. It's the Suzaku, Genbu, Sieryu, and Byako.
Yeah, Bieko. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about those
These are
guys?
yeah, they're well these I you would classify them as I guess yokai, but also more or less gods in like Shinto religion and like Taoist religion. Actually, they're kind of like equivalents of Chinese gods too in Japanese culture, but they cover constellations, they cover um directional like east, west, north. I think Genbu is like the black tortoise of the north, right? And so there's actually temple like too. This is interesting. You go to Japan, there's actually temples to these in various points in Japan where they would reside essentially. So like in the south is where, or the north is where the Genbu temple is at, which is it's essentially a black tortoise, which is really cool because they're like I love that they're animals. I think it's really cool that like they go to their churches and then they worship like these cool god animals. And then Suzaku is the bird. It's the vermilion bird, which I think is, and I'm trying to look for the page here because I had it up. I think it's the east or the west. Maybe no, it's the okay, yeah, it's I guess south. This one's south. Vermilion bird is south. Now, interestingly, the vermilion bird is usually associated with like a phoenix. So it depends like what you see it as. Like sometimes it's just like a bird or like a peacock looking thing. Sometimes it's like any type of bird really, but the most common you'll see is like a peacock that is essentially like a phoenix, I guess is what you would compare it to. But this is also part of that culture and some religion too with the Taoist five elements, right? But there's a fifth one too that I forgot to mention when I told you about. Because these all represent part of that too. And then you have Saryu, who's technically a dragon, sometimes represented as a snake, the azure dragon, as they call, right? So there's colors, right? The black tortoise of the north, the vermilion bird of the south, or red, and then the azure dragon of the, I want to say east, yeah, the east, blue, right? And then lastly, of the four generals, which is what you would refer to them as the four generals, is Byako, the white tiger of the west. which is, I mean, come on, dude. Like, how cool is that? Like, their gods or these things that they worship are represented by these like powerful looking creatures. Like that. That's really the only way that you can describe them is, they're always depicted that way, right? And then the fifth one is Kieran, which I forgot to mention earlier when I told you Kieran, which is represented a little bit differently. I'm pretty sure he has like antlers or something. Let me see if I can find the Wikipedia real quick on it so I can sound educated, so I can pretend to know what I'm talking about. Yeah, okay, yeah. The Kirin is actually the Japanese version of Killen, which is Chinese, right? It's part dragon and part deer with antlers and then fish scales and an ox's tail. And this one represents the metal element. But it's the fifth one in that set of essentially gods. I don't know. I can't be honest with you about whether or not there is a actual temple to Kirin in Japan. I'm not positive on that, so I'm not going to pretend that I know. But those, I mean, that's pretty cool. I always like those four. They're always represented in a lot of different aspects. The four generals is what they're generally referred to, and like it's interesting because in a lot of Japanese culture and like film and especially anime, they always represent the four generals as like a specific entity in whatever the story is telling, right? So the good guy is like whatever, and then he always has to face off against like four of something, right? And it's actually a kind of a common like number in their culture because of that. And so if you ever watch anything Japanese, you'll notice that you'll actually the names are pretty common. Those four, Genbu, Suryu, Suzaku, and Byakuya, are really common in that culture in terms of the gods. But that's interesting. I mean, I love that. I think that's pretty cool. What else do we got here? What's
The
next?
I purposely picked the coolest looking ones of the when I typed in the names. I didn't know anything about them, so I was like, let me just pick the coolest looking version of whatever he said.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
so I'm
This
glad
one
I
on the
did.
top, this one on the
Uh oh.
top that you picked, the Suryu, with the snake and then the dude with the sword, that's actually from Final Fantasy.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
from a video game.
That
That
was a
was from it,
problem that I had
which
with a lot of these. Was like a lot of them are named like have video games named after them, for not just these four, but like the all the characters, and so
yeah,
I
well,
had to
that's
like
that's
sift through
what's
them.
interesting about it is yeah, that's what's really interesting about them is these gods and yokai and all them are often represented in Japanese video games because it's common, right? It'd be like if Westerners made video games more often that had Jesus in them all the time.
There's actually
You
a
know what I mean?
Jesus video game that came out not too long ago, and where you can walk around doing miracles and shit. You have to level up your Jesus.
That's awesome. That sounds awesome. Okay, so what's next? Fujin and Raijin?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Fujin and Raijin are more gods. Like these, obviously you'd classify them as yokai or kami. Is actually the term kami meaning god or spirit. Um, I think depending on how the kanji is written, it would be god or spirit. In this case, god, which is essentially what the four generals are too. Those are kami as well. So these we're talking like this is the gods in their culture, and like you have yokai that like they represent all these weird things. you know like there's a little spirit that like licks the bathroom floor or whatever, and so they have spirits for everything, but then they have their kami, which is like their actual gods that generally represent elemental things. And again, like the four generals that represent a specific element from earth, wind, fire, water. And then we're like Raijin and Fujin represent the wind, right? Raijin is thunder, I believe. Yeah, Raijin is thunder and Fujin is wind. And these are they preside over that element, which I mean that's pretty cool. And the depiction of them I think is cool too. They have these like I think they're drums that are on the back of them. I'm not positive, but some of them have like these giant like sash that goes around them, but they're generally represented as like oni or like giant ogre looking things. One is usually like green and the other one is usually like yellow or like purple. But they preside over that specific element, Raijin being lightning and Fujin being wind, which I think the translation is actually like lightning demon. Like Rai is like thunder or lightning, and then Jin is like actually the word for like um spirit. I want to say it's like spirit or
That would
something
make
of the
sense.
sort. Yeah. So yeah, okay, so what's next? What else do we got here?
You have this cat looking thing, the Nekomata.
Oh, the Necomata. I I thought you were gonna find a more scantily clad Necomata for me.
I can if you want. I
Well,
saw a
okay, the
few of them.
Nekomata, this is an actual yokai. The Nekomata is like a cat spirit that like can change into a human. So like the Nekomata is really popular among like weeb culture because they all want to have sex with the Nekomata because it's thought that like when the cat turns into a human, it's usually like a really sexy girl with like cat ears and a tail. So if you're a furry, you probably want to have sex with a Nekomata.
You know
But
what? I remember you saying that. Um, something about the furry. Something like the furries would want to, you know, fuck this monster or whatever. And I didn't even, for whatever reason, I didn't think to like find one like a sexy picture of it. I did find one though for you. Here you go.
nice.
There you go.
Yeah, so basically like they're mischievous too. Like there's a really interesting folklore about them having to do with like basically like domestic cats like became like they basically became so domesticated that they were able to change into humans. I think is how it goes more or less, which is so funny because like you think about like maybe there's this old cat lady that like has a bunch of cats and like at one point in her life she's like I'm never gonna get married because you have so many cats, and then like eventually she just becomes or her cat turns into a man and is just like I'll bang you, you know. And so but I think the Nekomata is generally female. I'm pretty sure it's generally female, so I don't think there's like a male Nekomata.
Oh, that's a
But if
shame.
yeah, it's a shame. I know. I think it's a shame. But yeah, that's a funny one. That's a fun one because it's very popular among weebs, the Nekomata.
Speaking of sex symbols, I I mentioned earlier that I would find a picture of Pazuzu. Remember we were talking about that guy?
Oh
There he
yeah.
is. Yeah, that's the guy who like likes to lounge around in his own filth and shaved his own teeth down. Look
Gross.
at that.
Because
You can
you know,
almost
it's
smell
interesting
him.
that that name sounds familiar. Like, didn't we say it like spawned like a demon or something? Like
It is a demon.
Pazuzu?
It was a Middle Eastern demon who it probably still exists. I would imagine. I don't imagine they go anywhere. But for a while they worshipped this demon, and I would assume it was Babylonian times. They worshipped this demon Pazuzu, who I want to say had something to do with um, stealing babies. If I remember, and don't quote me, anybody. I'm not trying to give you good information, but he had something to do with mortality of babies and stealing babies, and I think that's how they associated him. Is like, don't talk about him when you're pregnant because you know it could lead to a miscarriage and all that. I think that's how they associated. Or what they blamed miscarriages and shit on was this Pazuzu demon. Now, this guy or whatever, he was just an odd duck in. Again, I want to say it was California. I didn't bother looking while I was there, but there's a documentary about him. Like Vice, while Vice
He
is,
definitely looks like a piece of shit.
oh,
That's for
he definitely
sure.
was. Like you got to watch this documentary because, um, maybe I watched it on YouTube on on the Vice channel or whatever, but. Vice normally they're garbage. They do bullshit
Yeah.
documentaries and articles and shit. But they have been doing a lot of like really interesting like real life crime things like this, and Pazuzu was one of them. And I was really fascinated by the story they did on Pazuzu. It was definitely weird, and I recommend it because you forget sometimes, like as often as we talk about weird shit that doesn't exist and like may not exist, and you know that we try to push and conspiracies and all that stuff. Like it's funny to like kind of get back to reality for a minute and be like, oh,
Hmm.
there are some really like terrible things going on out there, and like we're just totally ignoring them because we're so worried about all the stuff that
Right.
we can't prove. But then there's guys like this
Right.
dude. You know, life is sometimes stranger than truth is stranger than fiction sometimes. Um,
Right.
Next
Without a
up
doubt.
for you, V, is the Okami.
Yeah, Okami is a good one. That's actually Amoretsu, right? That's from a video game too that you got there
Sweet.
from the game Okami, which is actually interesting because that game is based on a Japanese god Amoretsu that gets turned into a Japanese wolf or an Okami. But the interesting thing about the actual Okami or the Japanese wolf is that they kind of like revere wolves as like a spiritual creature in general, which actually the word "okami" means wolf, but kami also means spirit, right? Or great spirit or deity or whatever you want to call it. So they kind of, because the name is similar to deity, they kind of revere the wolf as like a deity. And like if you read a lot of like old Japanese literature, I'm trying to think, Ryunosuke Akutagawa, he wrote Rashomon and a bunch of other Yamgru, a bunch of other like short stories and like poems, Japanese poems. It's in the work a lot. There's always like a mischievous wolf or like a wolf that is kind of like a Deus ex machina that shows up to like help the hero or whatever. So they always kind of see them as like spiritual, which is interesting because the name Okami, which means wolf, is also very similar to the word Okami with an extra I. So it's like you say Okami or Okami, I guess with an extra I, it makes it more spiritual. So it's kind of interesting.
So it's like when
Um,
chicks when they say hi, but then depending on the number of eyes afterwards is like how interested they are in you. So like this is
yeah,
depending on how so it's like hi, and you know that chick wants
yeah.
to get in your pants, but then like the ones that are like H that just say H or whatever in the text, you know there's no way. But like so for this, when they're super duper spiritual, it's like
Yeah.
Okame.
Yeah,
Like
the
that's like
extra
the
I.
god wolf.
Well, that's interesting. That's interesting that you put it like that because there's a lot of words in Japanese that they have that extra I. For example, there's this term Jiji, which means it's Jiji, which means old man. So if you call an old man Jiji, you're just saying, "Hey, old man," right? And it's kind of disrespectful. It's not because there's no like san or chan or whatever. But if you say GG with an extra I, it's like saying dirty old man. So it's literally like one letter, and it's one of those things that like I don't call anybody GG because you could say it wrong and not realize. Like it's one of those things like, did I add the extra I? Did it sound like I don't know,
Did you
you
add the
know?
R at the end, or did you say it with just the A,
Yeah,
the soft
yeah,
A?
exactly.
The
Yeah.
what
So
was
what
it? I
else do
was
we
I
got?
want
I
to
know we're
say it
running out of
was
time.
yeah I know I want to say it was Hebrew. They just doubled down on the word. They say it like twice, and that means doubly like whatever it is, like big instead of just saying big. It would be
Oh
like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
massive. I think it's kind of the same along those lines. Okuri and Inu.
Yeah, Akuri Inu. It's this one's kind of not really that. I mean, I don't know. I picked this one and I realized that there's better ones. It's kind of like this one's definitely a yokai. It's a spirit that like escorts you, I guess. There's an interesting story in Japan about the Hakuro, the dog. I think it's Hakuro. Um, Hakuro. Anyways, there's the statue of a dog in Tokyo, and it's basically like kind of based on this, but also like a real thing. There was this dog that would follow its master to the train station every day, and then without fail, he'd show up to like meet his master at the train station every day. But when the guy died, the dog kept doing it for like ever. Like he did it until he died. And so they ended up making this statue, and I think it's in Shibuya. Let me see the dog's name. Dog Shibuya. I think it's yeah, it's no, it's Hachiko. Hachiko, and that's it's an Akita, right? And so this is like not that long ago. It was like 1920, 1930 or something. And so they built a statue. So there's this statue to this basically um basically the Okura Inu that like would do this for his master, and then like, afterwards now they have like where people go, and then it's like it's interesting because the dog, right, it's this concept, and like an idea or whatever, but then they build a statue to it, so now it's kind of like, I don't know, does that make it more spiritual? Like we always talk about like idols and all that stuff, like does that make it more Does that immortalize this creature? Does that mean that this Hachiko went on to become like, an Okami?
I think it adds
But
him to more peace spaces by doing that. You know what
yeah,
I'm saying?
definitely. Yeah.
Um,
But what else? What else do we got? Let's skip this next one because there's a few that I want to cover that were like,
which one do you
um,
want to do?
let's do the Tengu. You got Tengu up?
Coming at you.
Okay, Tengu are bad. Like I love Tengu. This is another one of my favorite yokai, because they're spawned from like kind of weird folklore, right? There's like this weird like supernatural thing behind these ones, where they were like forest creatures that like um they have these like like the depiction. Like if you look at the depiction here, they're kind of like part bird, they're like part crow or part like um some sort of like weird bird, but they always have like long noses. Another interesting thing about the Tengu is that they're often associated with ninja, which fucking awesome. Like who doesn't love
Right,
ninja,
right, yeah.
right? Right. And like ninja weren't actually like these assassins. Like I don't know if you know the history of ninja, but like ninja weren't actually just like assassins. They weren't like this clan of assassins. Like that's all kind of stuff that's been like glamorized by like media. Ninjas were actually from these mountain towns called Yaga and Koga Mountains, and they were basically just farmers that were protecting their homes from bandits. And so what they would do is they learned how to use their tools that they used for like gardening and farming to make them into like weapons for fighting off these bandits. And then they learned espionage and like things like illusion and stuff that like how to kind of hide themselves. And really, there's a lot of interesting stuff behind that. But anyways, the stuff with ninjas that relate to Tengu is that they created these kind of theatrical ways of moving about. And so there was this period where a lot of people thought that like these ninja that were moving through the forest were actually Tengu, right? So there's like this interesting back connection between the Tengu, right, or these like what they called heavenly sentinels, that were evil demons in the forest, right? But really they were just these like farmers that were trying to protect. They were trying to protect their crops from bandits, and so all they did was create these like theatrical ways of scaring off people.
Huh.
So I think that's cool. I think that's cool because it kind of goes with the way that like samurai wear these like scary oni masks to like scare their opponents, right? Well, the ninja or these Tengu would wear these even like creepier weird masks to like scare people off and make them, oh no, there's demons in the forest, right? So that one was pretty cool. I also the last one that I think we can talk about. I want to briefly honorable mention. Somebody mentioned Kappa in the chat there that we're talking about Kappa and like
Yeah, it was Buzz Busby.
Kappa. Yeah, Buzz Busby mentioned the Kappa, and like the Kappa are like these little turtle like fairy spirits, like definitely a yokai, but they're generally found around water and whatnot. But there was this lore about Kappa that you could get them to grant wishes for you if you caught a Kappa. Now here's something interesting, pop culture reference. Kappa, if you've ever played the Super Mario Brothers, the Koopas in them, they're also turtles, and their names Koopa is actually a pun on the word Kappa. So that's kind of like a little pop culture reference for you
Well, I
there.
never ever got a wish from stomping on a Koopa.
I wanted to talk about the Tsuchinoko too, just because that was the one that I told you was like their Bigfoot. And when I say their Bigfoot, I don't mean like it's their Bigfoot. I
Right,
mean
right,
it's
right.
like it's the one that they have popularized for so long, like since for aeons, right? This Tsuchinoko is like I don't know how to describe it. It's like a flat looking snake, but there's also like giant versions of them, and like there's a bunch of different weird things about it that like go throughout pop culture essentially, where it changes or whatever. But it's a Yuma, right? It's what we would call a cryptid, and they go, oh, this thing exists, and if you find it, it's lucky or whatever. But then some people, they have like the funny thing about it, like this is why I say it's like Bigfoot. The funny thing about it is there's a lot of people that have claimed to have seen it, and so like so there's a culture, or I guess subculture, of Japanese people that go, I've seen this Tsuchinoko and like I know where it's at. And like there are hunters out there. They call them Yuma hunters, right? Where we would call them like cryptozoologists or whatever. But
Or
this is the
weirdos.
one that is like, yeah, weirdos. But this is the one where it's the closest to that where people are actively hunting it still. To this day, there's people in Japan that are like looking for the Tsuchinoko that are like, this thing is real, and if you catch it, it's like a big deal. The other one the only reason I wanted to talk about the Tanuki, was to be the last one because we're running short on time here, is because the Tanuki is like this raccoon thing, and of course we all know Tanuki from the Super Mario Brothers again. When you were Super Mario Brothers 3, you get the Tanuki suit, and you could turn into a raccoon-looking thing.
Yeah,
But
it
this one's
stood the test of
definitely.
time. They still do the Tanuki Mario, like in the
Do they
current
really?
Mario. Yeah, they still do.
Really? But it's definitely a yokai. It's another one that's just mischievous. It's associated a lot like the Okami and the Kappa, where it's very mischievous and hard to catch or whatever. But there were a couple other ones I wanted to go over. The Shinigami is kind of like their version of the Grim Reaper. Not a yokai, more of like a god, the Shinigami. It's weird. Like the Shinigami, the word is like it actually means death god, and like we call it like their Grim Reaper, but it's more like this guy escorts your soul to hell, sort of a thing, or heaven or whatever is after, whatever they call. So that one's interesting. I guess that one you could definitely classify as paranormal, not
Is
not a yokai.
is the Death Note guy a Shinigami?
Yeah, Death Note. The you're talking about Ryuk. Those guys are Shinigamis. Yeah, they're gods of death. They're the ones that like they choose who gets to die and who gets to live. The story that story is a little interesting because in that story there's a book that you have to write in to kill people, but the actual lore behind Shinigami in Japanese culture is they're just there when you die, and then they escort you. Basically,
Huh.
they take you to. They're like Grim Reapers. They go, oh, like it's time for you to go, and then they take you away.
Who else
So,
did you
but the
have? Did you?
depiction is varies. It varies their depiction. They're not like our Grim Reapers where they're like a skull with like a cape around them. It's depends, like it could be like an evil demon or an animal.
Did you want to talk about this guy real quick? Because I mean, it doesn't really matter where we can go as long as we want. I don't want you to feel like you're limited in time. I think the people who are still here are like the loyal viewers, anyways.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
did you want to talk about this guy? Because this was kind of a fascinating thing to me. The Zorigami.
Zorigami. You know what? I didn't have that one pulled up, and this one I'm not really that familiar with, so
From what I understand, it's like spirits that inhabit inanimate objects or something.
Zorigami. That sounds familiar, but I feel like there was something else about them that was like um let me see. Let me look it up.
And then I just found this picture and I was like, well, that's a cool picture. I had like in my mind, I was like, man, V, he's got some good taste. He's like picking these cool monsters and shit. And then like I ask you about it and you're like, I don't know. Like, well,
Yeah, this
never
is one of
mind,
the ones
V.
that I wasn't really familiar with. I don't know. I did pick this one, but I forget.
Oh
I'd have
well,
to like look
fuck it.
through the list.
That's everybody's homework for the week.
I
Then
just
the
ruined it. Ruined it.
Zorigami.
I ruined everything. I like talked like scholarly about these, and then like the last one, I'm like, I don't know.
I put it on you. I put it on you too late, V. It was my fault, so I'll take the
Yeah.
heat for that. Well then, in that case, since you know, since we're done, then
Yeah.
thank you guys for tuning in. I think today was like we had a lot of fun in the beginning, and then we learned a lot in the middle, and then well, and to the end, like we learned quite a bit about Japanese culture. We shit on the Black Lives Matter movement and cops. Like we didn't really take a side in any of that, so I feel like
No,
we were
did not.
pretty neutral in that, and I'm glad that we were. But no,
For one.
yeah.
For
Normally,
once.
normally we're very like one-sided on shit, and like if your opinion differs than ours, fuck you. Hit the down or hit the dislike button. But speaking of, if you haven't already, hit the thumbs up button or the thumbs down button. Doesn't really matter to me. Add your comments after the fact. Share with your friends, and if you haven't already, subscribed. We appreciate the hell out of you guys coming. Even James Pregler, who tuned in like 2 minutes to the end of the show. Appreciate you guys coming, and we'll see you next week. We'll talk to you in the between time. I'm sure we'll interact on Twitter a bit. Otherwise, you guys have a wonderful week, and we will see you next time.